Yeah, so I've been a writer all of my life. Like, we got our first computer when I was 10 years old, and I've been typing stories ever since. So this particular idea came to me in 2019, and originally it was just a short, simple romance. It was book 1 and done. But by the time I got to the end of book 1, there was so much more to tell that, I conceived the ending pretty quickly after I finished book 1, like, meaning the ending of the series, and so then it was just a matter of getting to that.
Okay. Now, you mentioned romance. So I have to ask the question, like, what is your intended audience with this book?
So I'm focusing on, and that's a good question if you wanna talk marketing too, because I include romance because that's how families are made, and this is a family saga. Like, there will be children born, you know, etcetera. So, romance is a huge component, particularly of book 1, but it is not the only, genre. Yeah, it's also action, politics.
A friend of mine was actually mentioned the other day on Twitter, specifically mentioning romance in men and about how men are starved for romance in books because they've all when you write romance now, it's not written for the way men experience romance. It's written specifically for a very particular type of woman. And, R.H. Snow is the person I didn't mention who remarked about this. And I don't know if it was something that like I hadn't thought about or no, but I mean the romance is definitely like you look at a lot of the classics, it's always part of the story. It's like it's never not there. Even look at, our Star Wars,
Mhm. No, you're saving the princess for romance. Like, that's the reason.
It's not maybe quite the pulp element of it, but in the broader like storytelling school, like romance has always been a part of it. So do you it sounds like you're trying to approach from more of like a understanding that this is a natural part of life, and if you're going to tell a true story, something that feels honest, it kind of has to be there.
So, and obviously I can't speak on behalf of men, but I know enough men and have talked to them often enough to know that, like, romance is not an automatic reject for them. I think based on the feedback I've gotten from the men that have read the story, and I've had a surprising number that have read it and reviewed it, they need to care about the characters in order to care about the romance. And a lot of the romantic fiction that men are not reading is badly written men, unrealistically written men, sometimes cringe, often cringe, which is fair because men don't always write women well, you know your audience, blah, blah, blah. But if you want, romance is not an automatic reject for men. If they care about the characters, they'll stick around for the romance and they'll care about the romance. And so I'm aware in terms of marketing that book 1 is romance heavy and is going to be a harder sell for men, but I'm hopeful that they will be able to get into the book and the series. And I think men do want to read about having a family and like that experience of life. I don't, maybe your 20-year-old men aren't quite so open to it, but I think the vast majority of male readers are perfectly fine with the family and romance and stuff as long as they care about the characters and the story's moving and there's, it's interesting.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that like obviously there's families and stuff that happen in this. I'm curious, like scope wise, in like we'll say in the time frame, like what kind of time frame are we looking at? Are we looking at like a book that takes place over generations, or are we looking at something that's very a very pointed place and time in this fictional world? It just a lot of things happen in that time period.
Yeah, so it's a fairly compressed time period for present day, but there are some extensive flashbacks to previous generations. So, one way of looking at it is that the catastrophe that created this world has already happened. In terms of fantasy, often it's either to prevent a catastrophe or like the fallout from it. And so, these are all the survivors of the catastrophe, and then learning why that happened will help them prevent it from happening again. And so in that way, you're looking at multiple generations of experience, and particularly my protagonist Ophel's family, their history will weigh heavily in this. And then, so that's the first 5 books, and then I'm actually working on a trilogy to take my main characters through the rest of their life. So that's going to be a much longer time frame.
So kind of moving along, and actually talk about the marketing stuff. What are you mentioned a few things in like your onboarding paperwork that I make everybody fill out. If you want to be a guest on the show, everybody, you can go on my website and I'll have you sign out and fill out the forms too. I'm sure it's annoying to people because it's a lot of questions. Everybody's like, I just want to sign up and show up and be done with this. Why make me do all this homework? Come on. But you mentioned a few different services, and in one of my most recent episodes, we talked particularly about scammers, and especially like when it comes to marketing. Out out myself here, say I'm not a scammer, but I also don't generally work with the kind of people I'm often talking to because they just can't afford what I'm capable of doing, and I wouldn't want to do that to them. But you get a lot of people trying to sell high end services to people that frankly just aren't in a place for it. So you mentioned two things. One of them was NetGalley, and the other one was what was the other website? Book Sirens. And anytime like I talk to it almost feels like they keep prices at maybe a point where it's like not so exhausted that people won't buy in, but it never seems to deliver on the promise that what these type of websites have. So if you could go in and tell me a little bit about your experiences with both of these, I think it would be awesome for my audience.
So it was a great experience with both and learned some things in both cases. So Book Sirens is much cheaper. It's $2 per download. So if you have 12 people download your book, that's 24 bucks out of your pocket. That is very reasonable. And you don't pay until the people actually do it. They invoice you afterward. I did not get nearly as big a response there as I did from NetGalley, but I think Book Sirens is more indie friendly in general. So they're more targeted toward that audience and less toward the huge industrial bestsellers that you find on NetGalley. NetGalley is the site of the industry that, in terms of serving up advanced reader copies for reviewers, for booksellers, for librarians, that's where everybody in the publishing industry goes to put their books out and then let the booksellers read it, decide if they want to carry it in the library or in the bookstore or in the library or wherever, and then reviewers as well. So that one is much more expensive. If you were going to get an account by yourself, it would be like $500. And I don't remember if that's once or like once a year or once period, but either way, that's a lot of money. So I used a co op for that. And it was $55 a month, which, if you're going to put an arc out, usually it's only for a month or two. So that was a much more reasonable price for me. The good thing about NetGalley, aside from a humongous audience of professional people, is that you get a lot more information out of it. So, for example, they can give you thumbs up or thumbs down on your cover, which gives you a good feedback on, the response that your cover is getting. They give you reasons why they requested a arc. So, like, was it your description? Was it your cover? Was it this? Was it that? And so, for example, I got 72 thumbs up and no thumbs down on my cover, which tells me I did a good job with well, I didn't. My book company, my cover designer did a great job. But that's great feedback, and if I'd gotten a bunch of thumbs down on it, then that would have been a good reason for me to go back and say, "Okay, what's wrong with it?" So, that was really great, and then also in both cases, a lot of those reviewers will go over to Goodreads and or Amazon and post reviews ahead of time, which gets still more buzz going because if they've got followers, particularly if they are bloggers, which a lot of them were, then if they got followers on Goodreads, then those people are going to be anticipating your book on Goodreads. So it's a great way to get enthusiasm going before your book ever comes out.
Interesting. I would ask the question: who is going to click on the book and not be interested in the cover? Like, it's oh, I thought this was interesting enough to click, but I hate the cover. Well, then why'd you click it? Like something's not adding up in your metrics there. You're lying to yourself about something, boss.
Yeah, well, I mean, they could be clicking it to tell you this is a terrible cover, which is also useful feedback.
And that would be useful feedback, I guess. I guess they wouldn't be requesting it if it was a terrible cover, I would imagine, but I don't know. I guess I don't know the all of the way that the website works. Anytime you can get more detail and like get very specific details out of an audience. So that's awesome. So it sounds like that place is actually set up to give you more granular data.
Yeah, for sure. You can get reports after they fact with very specific details about who downloaded it, who didn't download it. So you can see like they requested it. You get the choice whether or not to give it to them because you can see like what they've scored previous books. So if there's somebody that likes to just randomly two-star everything, you don't have to give them the book. And then you're also building interest if you're writing a series or, just as an author, you want to build an audience, then they will be interested, hopefully, in your follow up books. So if they read and review, then you know that you can contact them and say, hey, here's book two. Are you interested?
Okay. What other elements do you think are paramount in going out and starting doing this for your first go round? I'm imagining you have an email list set up to collect your own names. How does that incorporate with both of these types of services?
So one doesn't necessarily touch the other. I did get a bunch of people sign up for my mailing list before my book ever came out, which is just good to know that there's people that are serious fans. So, but it's all part of sort of generally tested methods that work. So I have a website, I have a mailing list on it, I have subscribers only goodies that I put out there. So, for example, the first chapter of book two is available on my website to subscribers as well as art. So, all of it feeds into each other. And then also making sure that inside the book itself, at the end of the book, it's got the please review me. This is my website, sign up for my mailing list, all those typical target points linking to those various areas.
And what is your primary way of driving traffic to your email list?
So the end of the book. That would be my best. That and I keep a strong presence on X. Yeah. But
That's where I was gonna go. Obviously, yeah, not particularly the what's the term there? The loss leader or the it's been a long day. Did I mention that?
no, I know.
But yeah, no, specifically, like you said X, you on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the places, or is X primarily where you work from?
X and Instagram. And that is another thing. So, if we're talking about marketing advice, it's know your audience. Like, I know that I am marketing primarily to romance readers first.